Dr. Collins?
Here.
Dr. Jacobowitz?
Here.
Ms. Jordan?
Here.
Mr. Lamb?
Here.
Ms. Lau?
Here.
Mr. Michael?
Here.
Mr. Shaughnessy?
Here.
Mrs. Shear?
Here.
Mr. Spicer?
Here.
Okay, we're all in attendance. Rise for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance
To the
to the flag
Flag.
of the United States of America and to
And
the
to the
republic
republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for
and
all.
justice for all.
Okay, we have executive session. There's no action pertaining to executive session. We have the approval of the minutes of the September 2nd meeting. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, there's a moved in a second, 3 moves in a second. Any corrections or changes? Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? No abstentions? Okay, unanimously adopted. The next item is the superintendent's report, which has a lot of components to it. Dr. Padalino, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Shaughnessy. I'll try to be efficient with our time. So just to start with, a quick reopening update on our first week. Just to let some people know, one of the things people are concerned about or like to know more about is our child care programs. Right now, we have the agreements with organizations to have child care in every one of our elementary schools. We're also working collaboratively with CCE, the Hodge Center, and the Boys and Girls Club, looking at how we can provide them with technical assistance and also to deliver food for our students in those locations, so we're working on that. Right now, the YMCA is the only child care program running in our schools, and they are only running at Edson at this time. They did not have the demand to run all 3 locations, so they will be continuing to offer that and be there if necessary. But right now they're running just at the YMCA and at Edson, and Healthy Kids will again are taking signups now. Both programs accept DSS. Both programs are also eligible with the county's financial assistance program that they've been offering. So we're going to continue to work with those partners. Boys and Girls Club is open right now. They're working. They have students there. CCE is looking to open next week. So we're, again, providing them with some technical assistance and also trying to figure out how we can get food to our students who are in those programs. So that's kind of the child care update for right now. One of the other things that we've really focused on, I guess, in the last couple of weeks is our technology distribution and our use of technology. So as of today, we've distributed more than 3,000 Chromebooks, and we've distributed 70 of the 100 hotspots that we have available for students who do not have internet access. Our help desk is fielding about 300 help calls every day, working with our parents and students and teachers to give them the best access they can. We are also holding tech town halls. Last night we had a virtual town hall from 6 to 7, which is recorded and on our website for people who missed it, who want to hear any of those answers. There are about 100 people on that town hall, and we will have another one tomorrow from 2 to 3. If you just go on our website, you click the link, and you're in the town hall, very similar to my town halls that I had a few weeks ago, and both will be recorded and up on our website. So we also will have more attendance data. Again, we're still working on collecting our attendance data and being able to report it out. So I'll have more attendance data for you the next time we meet to make sure that we have a handle on what our attendance looks like. Parent communication is going out this Saturday, as I've discussed many times, through Teams, so parents have some information about their students' assignments, the work that's due, the work they've done, and the work that's coming in the future. But overall, a lot of bumps, but overall, our conversations have been positive, they've been productive, and working with the faculty, administration, parents, and students, solving problems quickly on the fly, and doing our best to make the best of the remote situation. So we're pleased with the first week, and I think we'll get better over the next couple of weeks. And that's really the biggest thing we have with reopening. I do want to address one question that I think a lot of parents have asked me about the reopening when we return to the buildings, and for our teachers who are in the buildings. And one of those is about, continues to come up, is about our HVAC systems and our ability to have the air exchange necessary in each of those buildings. And I've invited Mr. Clapper into our team here today, and I think he is here. Mr. Clapper? Mr. Clapper is here. So, Mr. Clapper, I'll turn the floor over to you for a couple minutes if you just want to give the board a little bit of what you know and what we'd like to communicate about our ventilation systems.
Sure. First of all, I thank you for having me, and it's great to be back presenting to the board. And I know everybody's been really working hard to get ourselves back to school. First and foremost, I want everyone to know that our buildings are in compliance with regard to ventilation as far as the SCD regulations and compliance. And that's really due to the board's commitment and the district's commitment to upgrading and maintaining our systems. We've put a lot of capital throughout our buildings, and we've completely upgraded the heating and HVAC systems in George Washington, Kennedy, and the high school. At Chambers in Mahar, we had major renovations that provided outside air, new systems, new fan systems in both places, and the rest of our campuses we continue to maintain that they operate at peak efficiency. All our buildings are served by a building management system. We have two companies that provide that service for us, and what they do is they regulate a variety of standards like boiler temperature, zone temperature, water temperature. They monitor outside humidity, inside humidity. They monitor outside air damper, how far they're open, how far they're closed, things of that nature, fan speed. And so we're able to, at any time, go into those programs and adjust whatever we need to adjust to make the system operate more efficiently. There are several types of HVAC systems. Overwhelmingly in our building, what we have is univent systems. So a univent is that big box in the classroom that makes a lot of noise. And so those are what the components, the major components of those are, is a control valve, which ties to a thermostat or whatever, a heating coil, a damper setup that allows for outside air and inside air to mix, a fan to blow it through the coil, and a filter to filter the air. And they're the basic components. At the high school in Chambers, we have hot air systems that take outside air and inside air and mix it through a fan coil, and in the same vein, brings fresh air into the building and allows for a mixture of air that's considered healthy. The fresh air volume is a designed ratio between the rate of occupancy and the square footage of a building. The code requires 10 to 15 cubic feet of fresh air per person. SED requires that air volume in a classroom setting, we'll say, for a minimum of 30 students. So if you can imagine, if we have one person, like right now, a teacher in the classroom, there's enough air volume for 30 people. If we introduce kids in the COVID age, we're looking at maybe 14, 15 kids in a classroom, well, the design volume would greatly exceed the code requirements in that space. And there's a calculation, the numbers that I gave are guidelines. Every space is designed by a mechanical engineer, every unit's designed by a mechanical engineer, and the damper settings and programs are designed by those folks. So from one classroom to the other, if the square footage is relatively the same and the occupancy is relatively the same, the outside air would be the same. But in some areas, maybe say a shop class or an art class, the volume of air coming in might be a little higher. Because we, as a district, have smaller class sizes, and again, with COVID, with the smaller class sizes, our mechanical engineer said that volume typically ends up around 17 to 20 cubic feet per person, which again is a third above what the standard is for code. If you can imagine, all this air is entering the building, right? The building is full of air, and now we're bringing all this outside air in. And so the second component to all these systems are exhaust fans and relief dampers. So the air comes in through the unit vent or through the air handler, and then there's a system of ventilation, usually at the ceiling level, that relieves the pressure. And that's regulated by our building management system and inside air pressure. What you're trying to maintain is pressure in the building, so like when you open a door, air goes out, air doesn't come in. You're creating a zone of pressure so that, but you're maintaining it at a level that you're also exhausting air. And the entire system is exactly that. It's designed to exchange the air at a certain velocity and volume to create a healthy environment without creating air currents that are too strong, so that conditioning of the air is effective and efficient. So you're moving the air, but you don't want to move it too fast, because then your efficiency goes down. And in today's world, if you move the air too much, then the aerosol and what comes off humans can possibly travel a longer distance. So you want to control how you move the air, not just move air. The other major component is filtration, and there's been an awful lot of talk about filters. To date, there is no guidance on changing filters. There's been a lot of talk about it, there's been a lot of input on it, but the reality of it is all filters are rated by a MERV system, which is it's the minimum efficiency reporting values of the filter, and basically the higher the number, the more particles the filter captures. In a school setting, the standard MERV rating is 8 to 13. Like at our high school with the new equipment there, George Washington, JFK, all the air handlers are 13, the unit ventilators are MERV 11, and the bulk of the rest of our equipment is MERV 8. We have like air handlers that serve our gyms and auditoriums. They'd be probably in the MERV 11 range. With all of that said, it's not an exact ratio. So if you go from a MERV 8 to a MERV 11, you don't increase efficiency by 3. You increase efficiency by probably around 10%. The problem with, and it does seem logical, right, that if we want to filter the air, we want to be as healthy as possible, that we would put higher MERV rated filters in. But the reality of it is that the equipment operates, and the design of the equipment from the manufacturer requires a certain size filter at a certain MERV rating, and it will not operate properly, and it will not give the proper airflow if you increase the filter rating. The other issue is, in a lot of cases, the filter itself is thicker as you go up, as your MERV rating goes up, and it physically will not fit into the equipment. So there's been a ton of conversation on this. We're in compliance. We're meeting all the standards and recommendations of the manufacturers. Today, it's interesting that this is this time, because right now we're also in the process of putting together our 5-year plan. So our mechanical engineer was in district, and we had a conversation about this, and he said, you could maybe go up 1 MERV or 2, go from an 8 to a 9 or a 9 to a 10, but the value of filtration to the cost of the filter and the rate of replacing it may not be effective. And so again, we're waiting on guidance on that. but currently, all our unit vents have clean filters. We do that every summer. We do it twice a year summer, and we do it at Christmas break. Units like at the high school, because they have such a high volume of air and over at Chambers, we change 4 times a year. And for a point of reference, the Chambers air handler moves about 34,000 cubic feet of air a minute. So that's like a jet engine. I don't know how to compare it to something that could, that you could put your mind around. I know that was a lot of information, but the simple takeaways are our systems are designed for safe and healthy environments. They've all been engineered by mechanical engineers and approved by SED. We are actively improving and maintaining our systems so that they work efficiently and effectively as possible through capital projects, through maintenance work, through just daily activity of the custodial staff. We clean them, we make sure they're operating properly, and we move from there. We're actively following the guidance and industry standards to provide quality environments. And we're also, like I just said, we're planning for the future. We're consulting with our design team and mechanical engineers to provide a plan moving forward to address the concerns and the needs of the district. And I would be completely remiss if I didn't mention the importance of the maintenance and custodial staff. Our mission statement clearly states that we're dedicated to the health and safety of our students, staff, and visitors, and every day we live that. From March 13th to today, we were in those buildings, cleaning every surface, doing everything we could to make sure that the buildings were as healthy as possible when the staff and students return. And I can't thank those workers enough for their diligent work of cleaning and maintaining our buildings. They're doing a great job, and they understand what's at stake here. They understand what the environment is right now, and they understand the anxiety and the concerns, and they're working diligently every day to make sure our schools are healthy for everyone. And I know more than anything, those folks have a lot of pride, and the last thing they want is anybody to get ill in our buildings. So every day we stay true to our mission, and we create a healthy and safe environment.
Thank you. I have a question about, when you say 10 to 15 cubic feet per person, that's cubic feet per minute?
That is correct. Most measurement in HVAC is cubic feet per minute, CFM.
Okay, so with a minimum of 30 people, then that's 300 to 450 cubic feet per minute.
Correct. So how that's developed, again, it's a mathematical equation we have a damper that opens to outside air, and we have a return damper, and those are set at a certain position, 10%, 20%, 30%, or whatever it takes to make a mixture. So say a fan delivers 1,500 CFM out of a univentilated heater. So if you set your outside air damper to 20%, you would get 300 CFM. And so, and again, that is all, they call it sequencing and commissioning, and that's all designed by the mechanical engineer as part of the spec package when these systems are designed.
And we rely on outside experts to tell us that our systems are in compliance. Is that right?
Right. So what we do is we maintain them ourselves. We make sure that everything's working mechanically, like the dampers and all are working. And there are ways to commission and to validate the airflow. It's a time-consuming and expensive proposition. It can be done, but the system, if the damper was set at 20% in 1990, that fan is still delivering the same amount of air, and the outside damper is maintaining the same amount of air. So then it would lead to reason that it's properly bringing in the outside air. We have people that do it. Mike O'Rourke comes around. We had a situation over at Bailey. The person in a room, it was not a classroom, it was an office space, thought that there was not enough air coming through her room. It's called an altimeter, I believe. Mike O'Rourke came over with his machines. He tested the airflow. The room, when he went through the mathematical equation, the room required 65, I believe 64 or 65 cubic feet of air coming in, and the room was being provided with 75 cubic feet of air. So, and again, in our typical building, that was at Bailey. So at Bailey, I believe we have an inventory of over 60 classrooms. We have the office spaces, the cafeteria, the gym, the auditorium. It's a monumental task to test every unit. I'm quite certain that we're in compliance. I mean, can I quantify it for you? No, but I feel very confidently that we are in compliance.
And what happens if someone opens a window or?
If you can imagine the systems, right? So basically, the ventilation comes from the outside wall, because that's where you can get outside air. The ductwork comes through the wall and goes through the unit, and then the exhaust system is in the hallways or in the common space. So we move the air from the outside to the middle of the building. If we open windows, there's a possibility that we short circuit them, right? So some air will escape through the windows, will reduce the air pressure in the building. I know there's a lot of guidance out there to open windows and have fans, but again, these systems are designed to bring in the appropriate amount of outside air. And again, I don't think that, in my opinion, I don't think that we would want to move the air with any more velocity than we already do, because again, things will travel further. If you can imagine having dust on a tabletop and you take a fan and put it at the edge of the table and put it on high, the dust is going to move. So if we create new air currents in a building, that creates a whole new set of parameters that weren't in the design of the system.
Right, and Tom, in some of my discussions with some of our experts that we work with, the use of fans and the use of air conditioners is actually counterproductive to what we're trying to do, which is any particles drop instead of stay in the air longer, where a fan or a air conditioner keeps things in the air longer and travels further, correct?
That is a correct statement. The other thing, the CDC recommendation on fans says that only a single person in the room can direct the fan toward them. What their recommendation is the fan directs the air out. And again, like I said to you before, what we're trying to do is create pressure in the building so that we keep all the pollen and dust and everything else out of the building. And so if we start to open windows and put fans out, that pressure will drop in the building, and then it creates eddies and air currents in the building that are not conducive to healthy environments.
So we maintain a slightly positive air pressure in the classroom,
Correct.
so that air then goes out into and the hallway is a slightly lower pressure, and that pulls it out of the classroom, not very perceptively, right?
Right. If you stood in the doorway, and exactly as designed, if you stood in the doorway of a classroom, you would not feel the air going by you. And that's by design. The velocity is as important as volume in this case. The more velocity, the more travel apart. That it's simple physics. So what you're trying to do is, again, create a velocity and a volume for a healthy environment that doesn't take away from the efficiency of the system and the effectiveness of it.
Okay, Mr. Spicer, you have your hand up?
I do. Tom, serious layperson on this issue, but I wanted to know, is there a way for us to know how much air changes in a given classroom per hour? How much fresh air is getting there per hour?
Like I said, you could go to every unit find out exactly the CFM on it, do the mathematical equation by damper positions, and say, let's say it's 1,000 CFM coming through a particular unit, and the air position is at 15% outside air. So you could say that there's 150 CFM in a room, say it's 500 square feet. So every 4 or 5 minutes that air would exchange. I want everybody to take this away too. Buildings like schools, office buildings, medical arts buildings, malls are designed by square footage to occupancy ratings. The only spaces that are based on air exchange are like surgical theaters, clean rooms at IBM that create chips that need a really clean environment. They're based on air exchange because what they're trying to do is move that air enough, and if you've ever been in a clean room, you can feel the air current. They're moving it enough to move all particles to a filter, and they use multiple banks of HEPA filters. That's not what the design features of a school building is. So again, the air exchange is important, and you can calculate it out. I would say on average, and by the way, I believe, and again, I'm going from memory, but I believe, so say in a operating theater at a hospital, the air exchange is 7 to 10 times an hour. And I would say in our classrooms, as designed right now, we're probably changing the air 4 to 5 times an hour.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And someone had asked me about using UV lighting to purify the air. But I thought that I heard that SED doesn't approve UV lighting in the schools.
That is a correct statement. They have not approved any method of UV, whether it's in the HVAC system. There are UV light systems out there now that are like metal detectors. You walk in the building and you walk through an array of ultraviolet lights to purify the outside of your body. And SED has sent out guidance that is not allowable now, and they're still looking into it.
Okay.
Tom,
Mm-hmm.
a quick question. I went back to my notes from like 2 meetings ago, and I had written down that we were going to be needing to keep windows and doors open, and now you're saying that with the system we don't have to do that now?
Well, there's a break-even point, right? In everything, it all comes down to movement. And so right now, if you want to, it's like your house. It's beautiful weather out. You want to open your windows, you can open your windows. But if you can imagine, if the window is open, it's just atmospheric pressure. If the wind's blowing at 1 mile an hour, you're going to get so much CFM. If the wind's blowing at 15 miles an hour, you're going to get a greater amount of CFM. But for consistency, if you leave the unit fans on, you're going to move a certain amount of air as designed. Leaving the hallway doors open is probably a good idea, right? But there's all sorts, because you're actually allowing the air to flow at a slower volume and move it through into the exhaust fan. But again, safety comes in many shapes, ways, and forms. So what safety barriers are we going to allow to be breached? Classroom doors are supposed to be shut and locked. Front doors are supposed to be shut and locked. Campuses are supposed to be secure. So there's a lot of balance in this. If you ask me today, can the windows be open? Yeah, in September the windows can be open. But we're still going to be safe in December when the windows are closed and the HVAC system is working.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Can I ask a quick question? You talked earlier about filtration systems. You said that there's no guidance right now about what the filtration system should be.
Right.
And you talked about MERV, and like now I'm going through my notes, the layperson that Steve and I are. And it seems to me a pretty big difference between 8 and 13, and you described that a little bit, saying that it's not exponential necessarily, but can you talk about that again? I mean,
Right.
And clarify that, teachers who are in an 8 building as opposed to teachers who are in a 13 building, and students, how do we make everybody understand or feel that they are protected in the same way?
Well, and again, the manufacturers of that equipment said that this filter was recommended for their fan speed and velocity through their unit. So that's the first step. So if the unit is rated for an 8, that's what it's rated for. If the unit's rated for a 13, that's what it's rated for.
No, but isn't 8 COVID safe the same way 13 is COVID safe?
Well, quite frankly, and this is also from a CDC excerpt, even the MERV ratings go all the way to 19. And a 19 is a HEPA filter. From 17 to 19 are HEPA filters, which is the most stringent of filters. And again, they would be used in surgical theaters and those types of things. They go down to a certain micron. They do not go down to a COVID micron. So to say that without a doubt that this filter is going to filter out all viruses is you can't say that. So there is a chart, and I actually have a copy of it that I can distribute to the board or give to Camille to distribute to you of the different ratings of filters and what the micron levels are. But if the difference between, say, an 11 and a 13, the filter thickness is the same, the pleat is the same, the material is the same, but the coating on a 13 gives its rating. There's a I don't want to say chemical. They put a coating on it to increase the efficiency of the filter. So after a certain period of time, a 13 will drop to a 12 to an 11 as that coating starts to deteriorate. Okay, so although a lot of talk about MERV, it's not like a 9 is twice as good as an 8 or a 9. It just isn't that way. And I don't know the math behind it. It's a testing protocol, and it's put out by ASHRA, which is a leading agency for air conditioning and heat and these types of systems that we're talking about. And that's what they rate. It's a rating system that they put out so the manufacturers are consistent in their equipment. I know that doesn't sound good, but I would also like to say people a lot smarter than I, starting right after the Civil War, there was a Colonel Meigs who, if you're ever in Washington, D.C., there's a building museum down there. And he was charged with building the first War Department building. And people at that time, buildings were just closed up. Factories were closed up, and people were getting sick in the buildings. And he was the first guy to introduce outside air. And he introduced so much outside air, the buildings were cold, and everybody hated the building, and they moved out somewhere along the line. But from there, through mechanical design and engineer, all these safety factors have been put into HVAC systems. And if they weren't, you can imagine that every time you went in a building, because there's all sorts of good bacteria, good viruses, bad viruses floating in the air around us all the time. And so every time you go into the building, you potentially get sick. But because of the air currents, because of the filtration, because of the volume of air, because of study after study after study, again, by people much smarter than I, these are the standards that they put in place. So when they say a school building should be between an 8 and a 13, they design a school building between an 8 and a 13 mark. I hope that answers your question. There's really no silver bullet. I can't, but we are.
No, I hear that. I hear that.
All right.
Tom, just for my clarification,
Mm-hmm.
So is it true then that it's more important for us to have the appropriate filter on each unit that we have, which will make it run as efficiently as possible, than to try to retrofit some kind of other filter that won't make the unit as safe? And also, this is why we're asking people to mask. Isn't that true?
That is absolutely correct. So if a unit vent heater is designed to deliver 1,000 CFM with a MERV 8 filter, and we put a MERV 10 in, and it only delivers 700 cubic feet, we've reduced the air exchange. we've reduced the amount of volumes. And you're absolutely right. That's why we're wearing masks, and that's why we're personally protecting yourself. There's also a hierarchy of standards and procedures as far as what can be done to protect ourselves. And I also have a chart on that I can distribute. And that hierarchy talks about that first. PPE first, distancing, all those things. And then as all of those things are accomplished, then it goes down to mechanical things, upgrading heating systems, upgrading ventilation systems, those types of things. So the hierarchy starts with the individual, and then it works it down to the bigger system.
Thank you,
So,
Mr. Clapper.
Clapper,
Oh.
I just have a few more questions. So are we telling teachers they need to leave their doors open? Is that kind of the rule?
It is, and that is guidance from SED. They're saying leave your door open, even though it is a breach of fire codes. So leave your classroom door open, and it will help with the circulation. Yes.
Okay, and I'm assuming that the filtration systems are in bathrooms as well, just at a different.
Everywhere there is a univent heater or an air exchange. In our bathrooms, what we have is exhaust fans that actually, so if you can imagine a classroom with a bathroom, the heater is in the classroom. It also heats the bathroom, but there's also a draw from the bathroom ceiling with a vent pulling the air out of that space. So it circulates the air that way. And I can't speak for every bathroom, but that's typical of our bathrooms.
Okay. Any other questions?
One other thing too that and again, I don't want to take all your time, but the other piece of this in that hierarchy of standards is that we're maintaining our buildings. We have a custodial staff there every day, cleaning with disinfectant, cleaning surfaces, cleaning the surface of the UV light. They get all done cleaning, and then they mist the room. We were way ahead of the curve in this district. We had misters for the last 2 or 3 years that we were going around and doing our buildings. We bought a piece of equipment at the warehouse that makes the product in bulk, and we're doing it in bulk. We're bringing it to the school in 2.5 gallon buddy jugs. It's a multiple front containment, where it is not just ventilation and airflow and all that. There's multiple pieces to this. And another major component is the cleaning of the buildings, and we're doing it every day.
Thank you, Mr. Clapper.
So I know that was a long presentation, but there's been a lot of questions in the public about the ventilation systems. And I think if they listen to this presentation from Mr. Clapper, they'll realize that we have that he and our staff know what they are talking about in terms of ventilation in our schools, and they're dedicated to making sure that it's as safe as feasible.
Okay, moving on to the next item on the superintendent's report, and that report is athletics. And this is really just information, and I know I gave some of this to you already, but I think a decision it's early for us to be making a decision. This decision has multiple facets to it, including budget and reopening plans. So, but the governor has approved some sports starting on September 21st. Section 9 voted for the following model. Winter sports would begin on November 30th. Fall sports would begin in March with dates to be determined. And spring sports would begin in May, all with shortened seasons. So I am working with our athletic director talking about this. Philosophically, you've all heard my opinion on this. I don't understand how we could have sports when students are not in buildings. I don't understand how we can have sports when we are required to have 6 feet between students in classrooms while they wear masks, and PE has the similar restrictions as the classrooms, and then to turn around and say that we can have sports like swimming and soccer, and that's an issue for me. And we're an educational organization, not an athletic organization. Our priority and our energy should be focused on getting our students back into school and delivering the best education we can. And this is secondary, in my opinion. Great, and very few people are a fan of sports as I am, but I do believe this is putting the cart before the horse. Our responsibility is education. Serious safety, educational, and budgetary concerns around this plan. And just to give you one quick example, and I won't go on because there's a lot, and I'll give those to you at another time. Our transportation is the #1 expense for athletics in a normal situation. Under the current requirements, a bus that would have taken a team, let's say our soccer team, to an away game, we would put the team on one bus. Under the current regulations, that same team would require 3 buses. So our expenses for transportation, the largest expense within our athletic budget, will just triple for every contest. So again, I think there's a lot to be worked out here. I'm working with Mr. Silverstein. I will be transparent and say when this was brought to the Ulster County Superintendents, I voted no. And I believe that the Ulster Superintendents were the only group that voted no in Section 9, but this is, again, I don't think this was well thought out from a budgetary standpoint. I don't think this is well thought out from an education standpoint. I don't think this is well thought out from a safety standpoint. Either the permission to resume these sports or the permission or the Section 9's decision at this point. But again, I want to see our student athletes back on the field, back on the court, back in the pool, as much, if not more, than everybody else. But this is a hypocritical decision. If we're not bringing kids into school buildings and we're holding ourselves to certain guidelines and having these conversations we're having about ventilation, it's hard for me to wrap my head around participating in sports. So I'm going to work through this with Mr. Silverstein, Mr. Olson, and the people we need to work this through, and come with a recommendation to the board within the next week or so. And at that point, we can have a deeper discussion, but I will answer questions about that if anyone has them. Dr. Jacobowitz?
I just wanted to clarify. So when you say the Ulster County Superintendents voted no, you're saying they voted no on the Section 9 rules, the Section 9 proposal of starting in November?
And I will not say all the superintendents, and our superintendents took a vote. Majority of the superintendents in Ulster County voted no. When our representative went to Section 9, he represented our vote, which was the majority of districts in Ulster County, which, as you know, that's not a lot when we do it, and we voted no. He voted no in our.
I guess I'm asking for clarity on something a little bit different. There were 2 plans that I heard. One was that
there were
put
3.
some of this fall.
There were 3 plans.
Sorry?
There were 3 plans.
Right. So I'm asking what you voted no on.
I voted no on. The only thing the Section 9 put into a vote with the representatives of the section was this plan in front of us. The other plan.
Which is the one that starts on November 30th?
This is the one that starts on November 30th. There was one plan. There was one plan that started right in September. There was one plan that started January 30th.
Okay, so the one that we are looking at currently, which is the one that most Ulster County superintendents are voting no on, is the one that starts in November. Right,
and again, to be completely transparent here, the Ulster County Superintendent's votes doesn't really matter to Kingston. We don't participate for the most part in Ulster County athletics. We are OCIA, not in Mahal for the most part, so we spend most of our time on the road, going to Newburgh, going to Pine Bush, going to Middletown, going to Minisink Valley, going to Washingtonville, and them coming to us. Because of our size, we're a AA school, so we have to play other AA schools. So we will be playing Onteora, which is a C or a D school. So the vote within Ulster County has very little impact on us. But that was that's just how they broke down the regions. Does that make sense?
It does. I just didn't know what we voted no on, because you kept saying that if we're not letting kids back in schools, but right now the thought is that maybe we'd be hybrid by the 30th of November,
Uh,
but I understand that everything is in flux.
Well, it's
so-
it's not only the not having students in the schools, it's also the requirements that we have to follow within our school buildings and even within our PE classes are not required within the sports practices and such. That doesn't make sense to me. If I didn't
Right,
have
I
to
agree.
follow, if I didn't have to follow the, if we didn't have to follow these guidelines, I could bring more students back to school.
Right,
Right.
no, I understand. I understand.
So I just to have, to only be able to have 15 students in a 770 square foot classroom, but be able to put students, in front of the goal in soccer, packed in, trying to, defend and score, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But there'll be more on this. Is there another question? Ms. Lau? You're muted.
You're muted. I'm muted again. The final decision then, it's up to each district, so it's up to us?
Correct. The decision is ours. Section 9 does not govern the Kingston City School District. Again, the governor gave his permission for us to do this. The state, in the Kingston City School District, it's up to us to make the decision on how we move forward. Once again, there's multiple layers to this. There's the philosophical piece that I was just expressing. But there's also the budgetary piece. Those are things that we need to map out for all of you in this decision-making process.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next topic is budget.
The last thing that I have is budget, and I'll keep this kind of brief. You already know most of our concerns, and I gave you some outline a couple of weeks ago last week when I sent a letter out to our community. We are looking at $14 million in cuts, 20% of our total state aid. State aid is 43% of our budget. It's a significant impact on our budget. We used close to $5 million to close the budget gap this year prior to the COVID emergency. So we already have a significant reserve contribution to this year's budget prior to having the $14 million cut. So we are working through scenarios, looking at what we can do to bridge this gap and still deliver education to the students. And right now the strategies we're taking immediately are we are freezing our budget. So every expenditure will be evaluated at the business office and must be approved directly by me. We are also freezing all hiring, so any non-essential positions are not being filled, and any positions that are deemed essential are being evaluated as well before being filled. So we are, kind of shutting off the spigot, to use someone else's analogy. Right now, as we look at what we can do moving forward, the 20% is as you know, that's a significant number. 14% is almost 10% of our entire budget. So we are really looking at what we need to do, but this is a big mountain to climb. And within the next few days, we will have some proposals in front of the board for you to look at, and I may be asking Mr. Shaughnessy to consider a special meeting next week to discuss this more.
Okay?
Dr. Jacobowitz?
Dr. Catalino, I really appreciated that email and text that went to the entire district, and especially with the phone numbers at the end to call. This is just devastating. This is devastating, what we'll have to cut and what we will lose. And I hope that people really took it to heart and made the phone calls. It's really what we can do right now. And I just really appreciated your being open and upfront with our community about what we're facing.
Thank you.
The only problem that we have, the unfortunate, it's unfortunate in this aspect, is that our two senators from New York U.S. senators are Democrats, and they're in the minority in the U.S. Senate, and that's where the aid is going. Any aid we get from the federal government is going to have to go through the U.S. Senate as well as the House of Representatives, and that has been a big sticking point. So it's frustrating.
Ms. Jordan?
It is true that when we call our senators, they're usually sympathetic to this kind of cause, but as American citizens, we can call any senator if their votes impact what's happening in New York. So I would encourage our community to call any senator that they feel is having a negative impact on repaying New York for the expenses, when New York has paid for many expenses throughout the country when they have had calamities. So I wouldn't restrict our calling to just New York representatives, especially in the Senate, as Dr. Giroux said and Mr. Shaughnessy said. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Michael?
Yes, I wanted to say that listening to Governor Cuomo stating a few days ago that the state might be in about $30 billion in a hole the next 2 years, I think we should be prepared for the worst for this coming year or the next year. Go ahead, Mrs. Collins.
So,
Go ahead.
Dr. Collins?
You spoke a little bit about how the budget cuts interacted with the decisions around athletics. I'm wondering if you could just give us a little insight to how these the budget situation may interact with reopening plans as we're looking forward. And I know there are a lot of unknowns, but I'm wondering if you could just give us a little sense of how those things might interact.
Well, I think one of the things that's most troublesome for me is, and I know you've all heard me say this, because I said this in board meetings, that our original reopening plan that's been approved by the board, I called it an all hands on deck plan. If I don't have all hands to put on deck, we may have to make adjustments to our reopening plan. So again, those are the things we're looking at and trying to craft. Either a way that we can continue forward with our current plan, or an adjustment to that plan that we feel is, I don't think we're going to say it's going to feel it's equivalent to that plan, but that is still going to provide education for our students in an effective manner. And that's, but yeah, that's, again, I've said this to my cabinet as well. The original plan was all hands on deck plan. And we were hopeful that this would not be where we were. I think no matter what's coming out of Albany, there are some things coming out of Albany, some statements about schools coming out of Albany. I know for a fact we had 20% cut from last year's last aid payment. I know that. I have the information. We know we received $1.1 million less than we were supposed to for last year. That required us to take money out of our reserves to cover bills that we already paid for aid that we had expected to get, that we were never told was being cut. So if that is giving us anything to, if that gives us any indication of what the future looks like, my guess is that we're going to see 20% cuts from our next few aid payments. You'll hear out of Albany numbers saying the Kingston City School District only didn't receive X number from their first aid payment for 2021, and that's not 20%. Well, or they'll probably won't say it's not 20%. They'll just give you that number. But the truth of the matter is, a majority of our aid comes later in the year. So these early aid payments that we get at the beginning of the year are usually our smallest aid payments, and most of them, the first 3 or so, go directly into our contribution of TRS. But when we go into the January, February is when our big aid payments come. So you may hear statements like, well, Kingston only didn't receive X number of dollars so far. That's because these are the smaller payments. So if what we've seen so far is an indication of what's going to happen in the future, my expectation is this 20% is most likely going to stay, or some reasonable number close to 20%. I won't say, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Not some reasonable number close to 20%, some number reasonably close to 20%.
An unreasonable number, reasonably close. Okay. Any other questions on the budget?
Just, am I muted?
No, we hear you.
I just wanted to add to what Dr. Jacobowitz and the others had said. And I also want to send out a message to our community to know the financial challenges ahead are real, and without relief, they could really hurt. But I want everyone to know equity never left the table. So if there's to be hardships, I'm sure this board and the superintendent and district leadership will make sure it's shared equally by everyone.
Yes.
Okay, the last part of the superintendent's report will be our second century project and capital project updates, which I know many of you were at our facilities committee meeting, or watched our facilities committee and already seen these slides, but we'll go through them. A lot of progress in the last couple of weeks, so it's be nice to see the pictures. High school first. Okay, we're going to do the second century capital plan of the high school. Some dramatic pictures that you'll see here. Again, just the things that are the construction updates, what we're working on. And I think many of these actually are already very close to complete. But we can go on to the next. Work areas is what they're doing. The Tobin-Whiston demo, the related site work, our music wing, you'll see some pictures there. That's moving along pretty quickly. And our first and second floor west is going to be completed in spring. So we got 2 completed fall, 1 completed spring. New sidewalks at Kingston High School on the east side. There's our new stairs. So our new stairs have been placed and set. We're waiting for our handrails and our new light fixtures that will come on the sides. If we remember from the drawings, they'll be reminiscent of the original light fixtures that were there at Kingston High. And thank you to Mrs. Shearer for continuing to champion those. Next. Oh, and the handrail, Mrs. Shearer, will be there in the middle. Again, we remember where we had a lot of planting and overgrown trees in front of Kingston High School. They're gone now, and this is the new topsoil and the grading in that area. New bridge, new floor for the bridge. Bridge is going across to the field house. The stairwells, which I showed you last time, which they were on both sides of the building, are pretty dramatic. Now, they were there before. The windows are new. Now they have windows there. Plumbing and framing. Again, more duct work. Framing, sheetrocking throughout the building. And more of that throughout the west side. Can keep going. So we got music wing. So many of you know what the music wing looks like. So now you see the removal of the ceiling and the corridor demo there in that area. This is one of those parts of the building was really in need. More of the same, just the demolition parts of this, removing the ceilings. That you see in your music rooms, the demo of all those areas. Windows are out. Stairwells, new stair treads, heading up to that part of the building. Go ahead. We're moving some of the terrazzo. There's our new elevator. So we put new floors next to that elevator. The terrazzo floors will be replaced with terrazzo floors. So if you've seen any of the new terrazzo repair they've done, it's phenomenal. That's where we used to walk across here on your right. It's where you used to walk across into Whiston Tobin. No longer there. So they're infilling that. And that is what's left of Whiston Tobin. So we have, so the demolition is complete. They have a rock crusher there, a brick crusher there that's crushing that into basically dust. And you can see the difference there for the look of the campus and the aesthetics of the campus with that gone. And I'm sure the people who live behind are seeing light they haven't seen since they've lived there with living in the shadow of Weston Tobin. You can go to the next one. More of the same. It's a little earlier picture where the bricks were not dust. The Carnegie fascia painting, which we've talked about before, they're starting that. That should be complete soon. And that is it for Kingston High School. And we have one more capital project. Any questions on Kingston High School?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, Priscilla. Ms. Lott.
When is the landscaping going in the front of the high school?
In front of high school, they'll be going in this fall, as well as in Weston Tobin also. That will be removed, and they'll be, this fall, the planning, that site work will be completed by this fall.
Okay, thanks.
This is 2 more projects, but actually, hold it. So this is really 3 buildings, but with the big works going on in Miller and JFK, but I will report a little bit on Edson. So what's going on right now at Edson, the boiler room testing is underway. The boiler controls are in progress. You heard Mr. Clapper talk about our controls and our systems. That's we're putting those in place. They're computer controls of how we operate our systems. Control room and taping, I'll show you some pictures of that. It's underway in the auditorium. And the panel fabrication, which you won't see that, but that's ongoing. And the stage floor refinishing is going on. You'll see pictures of that. A lot going on at JFK. If you want to take a drive over there, I think it's a dramatic difference what's going on at JFK right now. Interior window trim is done. The window sills is done, and the completion, the installation is complete. The concrete sidewalks are done. The concrete steps are done. Testing and balance is going on right now. The heating system and the elevator deliveries are anticipated next week. Again, if you remember, with the elevator, we didn't expect to have until January, up and running until January. So kind of the areas that I just mentioned. So this is Edson boiler room. So this is the one piece of Edson we were able to keep in the project. So we were able to do that. We were glad to be able to do that along with the Miller and JFK pieces. More boiler rooms. Again, more boiler rooms. New front stairs. So that's nice. And the new sidewalk. And we were lucky enough that the city decided that they would pave Grove Street. So not only do we have new asphalt pavement in our parking lots, but we have brand new street in front. So I will thank the city for that. We didn't do that; they did. So it's nice that it was all put in there at the same time. Again, another picture of the front, the asphalt replacement, and the parking lot is so much better. You've all been to that parking lot in the past, and you've hit the potholes and the dips in the pavement. Now it's all striped and lined and ready to go. There's the elevator construction. That's the curtain and the curtain wall next to it. Same thing. That's where elevator thing. New bathrooms, new bathroom fixtures in JFK. And again, some site work, planting some trees in the areas where we had to take them out and put in the new sidewalks. Miller Auditorium. So it doesn't look much like it did before. It's a giant empty space, but the demolition and the painting is going on. That's the control room in the back. I don't know how many of you ever noticed it was there, but there's a control room in the very back of the auditorium, so that's being redone. Got the new framing in the back for the drywall and the new sound tiles. And that is it. Any questions on JFK, Miller, and Edson? Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the superintendent's report. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Dr. Catalino. The next section of our agenda is the Board of Education. And Mrs. Siri is going to give us some information on, or give you information on correspondence that's been received in the last several weeks?
We have had many emails. The first I'm going to read, two I'm going to read. We've received 17 emails supporting the removal of SROs in KCSD. I'm going to read 2 of those.
Okay.
Addressing student safety and wellness is complex and has as much to do with life at home as it does life at school. Adding armed officers with the ability to harm and arrest students compounds any challenge students may be facing and criminalizes our youth, predominantly affecting black girls and boys and students with special needs. The fact that I can Google search cop body slams young student and get several unique hits shows that the police are a product of their training, which is inappropriate and harmful in a school setting. If you're thinking that cops in schools prevent mass shootings, then the sobering fact is that they stop far less than those that occur. Schools with cops are more likely to refer students to law enforcement for non-serious violent behaviors, and a report found that in 43 states and DC, black students were more likely to be arrested than other students while at school, fueling the school-to-prison pipeline. We need to recognize that student behaviors are symptoms of larger problems, and meeting those symptoms with force is counterproductive and damaging. We all were kids once. The chemical imbalances associated with puberty make a bad hair day feel like the end of the world. We need more counselors for students and student safety monitors unaffiliated with the police who can separate kids in a fight without an arrest. Parents can raise their children as good as angels, but as long as schoolyards have existed, so too have our emotions boiled over into fisticuffs. School fights are a teachable moment, not a criminal one. Do we want to protect students and safeguard their development, or protect cops that criminalize children? The presence of police officers increases anxiety in students and hinders their focus on education. Prioritize kids, not cops, please. And that email is from Patrick Pelicano.
That email is from who?
Patrick Pelicano.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. The next email on the same subject is from Isaiah Russell. As a person who always supports education budgets and happily pays taxes for improving the learning experience, I feel compelled to share a few thoughts. Before we continue the resource officer concept, we should take a sincere inventory of the resources they have actually offered young people. As someone who values quantifiable evidence, and as an institution whose purpose is education, we can agree that there should first be studies that show the positive results that come from something before we make a decision. In this case, listing the positive results of having police officers in an adolescent learning environment. Don't you build your curriculums this way? Don't you reject curriculums that bear negative results? I am concerned, because the only results we have nationwide from police presence in schools are negative. I am starting to believe in the school-to-prison pipeline, and I suspect that police presence in schools may play a part in that. When trying to guide the adolescents in my life, I try to put myself in their shoes. I think you and I both should imagine our work or learning environments with the intimidating force of police officers and see if it has a positive effect, even in our own thought experiment. For me, it does not. For Kingston adolescents, I can't imagine that it does. I feel police should be replaced with actual comprehensive resources in schools. Although I feel strongly about that, this note is not a mere statement in opposition to the presence of police in our school. I am genuinely curious. What are the actual resources that a resource officer provides? What does your data show about the effectiveness? What are the potential risks and rewards, and does one outweigh the other? Could there be a position created whose duties are to address the unmet needs of students by using resources? Would that position be more fit than a resource officer? Thank you very much. We also have 38 emails.
Who's that one from?
Isaiah Russell.
Okay.
We also have 38 emails opposing the Kingstonian. I'm going to read the one letter that came to us. I believe it's 26 times. It's the same letter. The Kingston Common Council unanimously approved general terms for a $30.6 million deviated payment in lieu of taxes pilot for the Kingstonian project. Although the Kingston Common Council may believe that the tax-free deal for luxury apartments is a good deal for Kingston, it is only one of 3 involved agencies that will need to approve the pilot before it can be implemented by the Ulster County Industrial Development Corporation. They include the Ulster County Legislature and the Board of Education for the Kingston City School District. A tax-free deal for luxury apartments in Kingston will be felt beyond the Kingston city boundary. Municipalities that pay Kingston City school taxes is not only the city of Kingston, but also includes the town of Esopus, Hurley, Marbletown, New Paltz, Kingston, Rosendale, Saugerties, Ulster, and Woodstock. Pilots result in less taxable value, which requires everyone else to make up the difference. For a developer that stands to make a windfall in profits, that's not fair to residents working hard to pay their taxes in Ulster County. Will the Ulster County Legislature and Board of Education allow the developer to defer taxes for the school district because the applicant claims there will be no school-aged children living in the Kingstonian property? By this logic, anyone without children in the public school system should not be required to pay school taxes. Education is a public good for which we all have a responsibility to pay taxes because we all benefit from an educated populace. As a tax-paying resident living within the Kingston City School District, I'm writing to ask you to reject the Kingstonian tax-free deal and insist that they pay their fair share of taxes for their luxury apartment and boutique hotel development.
Thank you. I would also say we received a one email from the developers of the Kingstonian, and they had an attachment that I believe was 9 pages long with a list of 10 issues raised and their rebuttal to it. So if anyone would like that, they could contact the Kingstonian developers, or they could send me an email and I will send it to them, to you. Would you like to say something, Mr. Spicer, about your SRO advisory committee since we had 2 letters on that issue?
You're muted. You're muted.
We don't hear you, Mr. Spicer. Did you hear my question?
The button was not, the button did not appear. But first, to address the first 2 letters that we did review tonight, it just shows how important this issue is to our community, and it shows how engaged everyone is and how important it is about what we're going to do moving forward. Later on in the meeting, I guess would have come under new business, but I'm not sure. I was going to review this with everyone, but I could do it now. Everyone should have received the email action plan for the SRO subcommittee that we're forming. The first meeting of this subcommittee, as we're all aware, is Monday, October 5th. I have not picked a time for the meeting yet. If everyone can forward me the best times for them, I'll pick the most common time for us all, and then email it to everyone. But once again, our community needs to know the board is taking a sober, realistic, data-reviewed process to see how best to deal with this issue. We understand the passion, we share it, but the decisions about how to go forward must be made on all the data we can gather to produce a final report that we want to at the board meeting when the subcommittee comes to its conclusions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Spicer. Mr. Michael? You have your hand up?
You're muted too.
Mr. Michael?
Yes, I would like to make a couple comments about the Kingstonian project.
Okay.
I want to let the community know and the taxpayers, from my first day on the board, I had always believed there are 3 components in education. There's students, the teachers, and the taxpayers. And I believe the taxpayers have a strong voice in our community because I'm a taxpayer and every one of us is a taxpayer in the community. So I do value their voice, but I do believe also the Kingstonian project is going to be a real gem in the community. And I always believe progress always outweighs the negatives. I had a brief conversation with Mrs. Woodworth from the executive director of the IDA, and he had asked me if tonight we had a resolution on the table to vote on the Kingstonian, and I said we are far away from that, because I said I cannot, as a Audit Finance Committee, we can't make any recommendation to the board yet, because I actually haven't seen the pilot application from the developers. So I requested to see that application. We'll be getting that soon, I believe. And definitely we're going to have some more discussion at the next Audit and Finance Committee meeting on September 22nd.
And then hopefully we will have something, you will get something from the developers in writing. We haven't had anything really in writing directly from the developers.
The developers so far, they did make a representation to us, back in August 19, as you were present, I believe. And nothing has changed since then. So I want to let the community know and understand that we did not have any formal negotiations as far as their project. We only, at our first meeting back in September 2018, one of the committee members suggested for the developers to have some scholarships or internships, with their application. So since then, we have no negotiations, period. Only back in August 19, again, they came back, they presented what they need to have from us. They said, we gotta have this pilot program in order to move ahead. And the only thing I can say, the city got what they wanted. They accepted their application, but as another jurisdiction, we don't have to. We can make some changes to their application, we can make some more demands, and we see how it goes.
Okay. Are there any questions that any board member has to Mr. Michael?
Now, I wonder if anybody has any question.
Mrs. Scheer?
Yes, are you saying we can make changes to the application, or
We come
do you mean we can negotiate with them yet, because we have not at this point, and I don't, for changes, we can't make the changes ourselves in the
No, we
application.
can request the changes. We can request. If you
Yes,
don't-
yes.
Yes.
You
That's
lost
what
me
I
for a
mean.
minute there.
So, Mr. Michael, are you thinking that we would request those changes at an audit and finance committee, or is this something you want input from the board on before that or after that, or like when does that happen?
Well, as I said, after the next meeting, we can, the committee can come to the board and make some suggestions, what you would like to see.
So
We still have some more discussion. I don't think we are ready to move forward with this, to vote on it. So I believe we stay far off from putting a resolution.
I think we need to have a thorough discussion at a board meeting, which I don't believe we've had yet.
Not in 2 years.
There's never been a resolution on the agenda of a board meeting to approve the Kingstonian pilot proposal. I think I'm right on that. If I'm not right, someone can correct me.
You are correct.
You're right. Yes, you are. Can I ask another question?
Yes?
At our last meeting, you announced that Mr. Michael would be meeting with the developers, along with the administration. Has that been scheduled, the meeting?
Has not been scheduled yet. Unless Mr. Michael did something. I'm sorry, I should have
No,
spoken.
we haven't had any meeting because I didn't feel it was necessary. I believe we're still, in early stages, as far as our part. So as I said, we need to have some more discussion at the Audit and Finance Committee next week. And then we can come back to the board to have some recommendations or we have more discussions.
I think Mr. Michael's
So, no.
point, Mr. Michael's point a couple of weeks ago was we want to see the application to the IDA before we have open new conversations with the developers, because we have not actually seen the IDA application.
And I can add this, Dr. Padalino, that when I spoke to Mrs. Warner, she has said they just finalized their pilot application when they had the last meeting with the IDA last week. So I would like to see that application. I want to have it in front of me because as far as I know, I'm in the dark. They make their representations, they say what they need to do, but I haven't actually seen the pilot application. And that's something I need to do in order to actually make a recommendation, myself as a committee, to the rest of you, so we can have a discussion.
Which is required in policy. It's required in our policy that it come to the Audit and Finance first.
Well, it also is more or less, we have an application to the community, and it says government entity, we must do that, be open and transparent.
Mrs. Jordan has a question.
Thank you.
Mrs. Jordan?
Mr. Michael, I wondered if you wanted any questions that we might have for your Audit and Finance Committee, or would you rather wait until you make your presentation?
No, you're welcome to ask many questions, and whatever you need to know, we can discuss it at the meeting next week, and we can bring it back to the board.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to say that one thing that I don't feel that we have, and I don't know that we'll get it, is a real understanding of how the developers, and actually the developers include Mayor Noble, because this is a co-project, the public-private partnership in this. But we really don't have any numbers that show us how they arrived at their need for $28.6 million in eliminated property taxes. And this is going to impact. They want us to relinquish $18 million approximately in school taxes. And I think that we have a right to know how those numbers were arrived at. And if there are places within those numbers that are out of line with what it should be. So I hope that we have that discussion through the Audit and Finance Committee, or when it comes to the board for discussion at the board. So if there's no other questions, we'll move on. Next item on the agenda is facility.
I have a comment.
Yes.
It is a little disheartening because I just received my school taxes today. I'm sure that everybody did. So for these people to ask for that pilot, when we're all paying taxes, it's just mind-boggling to me. And they do go up every year, so.
Well,
Mr. Michael?
to the fact that we are entering charter waters nowadays with the state aid be cut off, by 20%, and probably it's going to happen next year also. Will be 20% cuts of our state funding. we have to look at this more carefully.
We certainly do. I think it's a bad time for them to come with it now, that's for sure.
Okay?
Thank you.
Well, especially now,
Yes.
especially now.
Okay, the next item on the Board of Education agenda is Facilities Committee. Mrs. Scheer?
Well, thankfully, I'll make this brief because much of it was covered with the pictures. They're always worth, 1,000 words there. The project is moving along well at the high school, and the demolition of the Total Winston building, the bricks are being reutilized and crushed and used to backfill prior to paving. The trees in front of me have been trimmed. One large tree was compromised in recent high winds and had to be removed. You heard about the steps. The new Dectron unit in the pool has been installed and tested, and the epoxy floor replacement in the field house has been completed, and the contract is now ready to close out. In terms of the summer work that was done at JFK and Miller, you saw the pictures. That was beautiful. All the windows that have been scheduled for this year for Miller have been completed, and new windows for the Miller Tech Wing are being priced currently. The work is now concentrating on the auditorium, as you saw, with ceiling repair and the wall prep taking place for acoustical enhancement installation, and the new light system and booth will be turned over to the district in December of 2020. Mr. Clapper gave a wonderfully thorough review of ventilation systems. I had notes that pale in comparison, so I'm not even going to read them. And let me see. In addition to that, maintenance has been involved in a lot of things. Individual windows that have been reported at GW Crosby, Graves, and Chambers as being stuck or non-operational are all being addressed. At least one bottle filling station has been installed in all the schools. The IT for KHS West Wing is being installed right now. Bailey office received a new carpet. Certain exterior doors at Graves, JFK, and Chambers have been replaced. The modular classroom at Miller has been re-sided, a new metal ramp installed, and new windows and skirting completed. The LED lighting project at Miller has been completed, and maintenance crew has already been doing yeoman's work in terms of moving furniture and installing cabinetry. Also being addressed, a hot water line at Bailey and the gym floor at JFK. Progress on the new building conditions survey. We're in the first group up to be reviewed by State Ed. BBL, KSQ, and District Administration met this past week, or they're slated to meet this past week, and they have begun the work. Building inspection dates, the regular board building inspection dates begin with Kingston High School on September 21st and end at Mahar on October 26th. There will be no facilities meeting in October due to the inspection schedule. The original schedule said November, but we moved the inspections up earlier, and many of them will be done before the schools reopen. Our next meeting will be on Monday, November 9th at 3:30, which is not a Wednesday, I realize that, but Wednesday that week is a holiday. So we're going to be meeting in person, and the location will be announced. Everybody will get an email. I'd like to invite the board and all of the facilities committee to accompany the inspection team on September 21st at Kingston High School. I know you've all been very anxious to see the work that was done on the East Wing, and maybe we can arrange another tour later in the year because the West Wing work is proceeding at quite a clip. The team will be meeting at 3:30 at the new student entrance. And please be on time. If you are not on the crew, the inspection team, and you do want to tour the building or on the board or on the facilities team, please let me and Camille know so that we know who to expect. We'll be entering the building. We'll stay together in a group. Distancing, masks are required. The staff have been there. Faculty and staff have been there. Of course, since school reopened, and So we will be entering before the deep clean that day. And yeah, the tour will probably take about an hour. So if you don't have an hour to spend, maybe you want to wait until the spring tour. But please let us know. The people on the team from the facilities committee for that tour, excuse me, it's everybody if you all want to come. But I think the people who have signed up are me and Herb.
Will that be at 3:30 for Nora?
3:30. 3:30 at the new student entrance, and please be on time. We'll try and stay together. They don't want us taking our own tours, you know.
Yes, and please let us know, because if we go into any area that's under construction, we will need to wear hard hats, and BBL will supply them.
Yes, but the cruise will be finished by 3:30 that day, so they'll no longer be there except for, you know, the people who are there for the tour.
Okay.
And that concludes my report.
Are there any questions? That's very thorough, Mrs. Scheer. Thank you.
So, Ms. Scheer, you actually need board members to sign up and let you know ahead of time for the high school tour, right?
No, just for the high school tour. I have the teams already assembled for the other tours, but for the high school, if you want to be there, we need to know who's coming and be on time, because we will sit together and wear a mask.
Okay, I put it on my calendar, so I thought that's all I needed to do. But yes, I'd like to be included in the high school tour.
Okay. But anybody else who wants to, please let us know. Let me or Camille know, or both of us.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, the next agenda item is the policy committee. Mrs. Jordan.
Thank you. The policy committee met on Friday, September 11th, via Teams. We missed Mr. Spicer, and we thank him for his work in the past, and we welcome Mrs. Shearer. And so we're off to a new year, and we had a hefty agenda, and I've been warned by Mr. Turner that we can expect that. So we did review student health services, pandemic planning, info and data privacy, online distance and remote learning, and the one policy we have given you today for first reading is student attendance, 5100. We reviewed that policy. Mr. Verge was kind enough to compare it to the NISPA policy update and recommendations, but because we already have an student attendance policy, he was able to masterfully dovetail all of the things that we felt we needed in response to the distance learning and any other things that have come up. So he was able to make recommendations, and after a lot of conversation, we have offered you a first reading of that policy, and it's in your library, I believe. We will, take the time to read it carefully. If you have any concerns about it, you can let me know before the next meeting, and we will review that for adoption on October 7th.
Okay.
As always, these policies, can change on a word, and the meaning can change on a word. And Dr. Catalino and Mr. Olson and of course Mr. Verge are always so helpful in terms of looking at it from every angle. And the board members present are always so helpful as well. So I think we really do a thorough reading and consider how we can improve it for better understanding and applicability, considering everything that we're looking at now. So the other policies there will be available for your first reading next time. So, and Mr. Verge was kind enough to do a slide presentation to deal with information and data privacy, security, breach, and notification, because it comes under education law 2D, and it's kind of complex, so he did a lovely slide presentation, which I've asked him to send to the entire board, and it really helps clarify. And I think next week, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to ask Mr. Burge to do that for the public's benefit, just a brief overview of that slide presentation. And our next meeting is October 2nd at 9:30, and I believe it may be on Teams again. But we look forward to being in the same space when it's safe. And I just want to thank everybody because it's really a slog.
Okay, any questions for Mrs. Jordan? Okay, thank you, Mrs. Jordan. The consent agenda, are there any resolutions that anyone would like to have pulled from the consent agenda? Well, I guess I asked that question first. Any resolutions to pull? Okay, hearing none, may I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Mrs. Scheer and Mr. Lamb seconded. Are there any questions about any resolution? I have a question about B13, the Management Advisory Group. What would they be doing for us?
They help us with our state aid, make sure we get the state aid that we need.
Okay.
That we're supposed to get. And I do want to point out that was the date there is March 2nd. There was just some lag time, with everything that was going on, and we did not engage this contract until we won't until tomorrow. But the contract did come through in March, but we have not paid for any service or received any services, and won't until tomorrow.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Abstention. So it's unanimously approved. We do have one donation for Dr.
Yes. Are you ready?
Collins, for Dr. Collins to tell us about.
All right, so we have a Kingston City District Athletic Department received a generous donation of 16 basketball uniforms. This comes from the G. Warren Caius Scholarship Committee, which is chaired by Greg Longdale. These uniforms will be distributed to the JV boys basketball team. So we are very grateful and we accept this donation with gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is old business. Is there any old business to discuss? I think we might want to ask Dr. Palladino about the progress on the board reopening oversight or advisory committee.
So I have reached out to some of our community partners to ask for their participation. I've received several names and commitments back. I've been working with Dr. Collins and Dr. Jacobowitz to kind of bring together some names of some other parents, from our buildings, probably by our grade spans, as well as representatives from our Kingston Teachers Federation. So I should have that finished up by the end of the week, and I'll communicate that out to the board as well as meeting dates and times. So we do have commitments from, like I said, several of our community organizations, but we need to get a hold of some of our parents and teachers and get them on.
Okay.
Other than, I know Dr. Collins and Dr. Jacobowitz are parents, but
Right.
other parents.
Yes. Okay, are there any questions for Dr. Palladino about that? Okay, Dr. Palladino is the person in the district that has close contacts with our various community organizations that we have agreements with and participate with us in carrying out our mission. And he would also be the person who will be responsible for implementing any recommendations that the board might approve. So I think having him take a lead in this committee is appropriate. Any other old business? New business? We do have resolutions from, Mrs. Jordan?
Suzanne had a hand up. Suzanne had a hand up.
Yes, Mrs. Jordan.
The new business.
Okay.
I guess this comes under new business. I just wondered, I know that this is kind of for the T&L gang, but I know that we rely a lot on our STAR testing, and I'm just wondering if there's been any consideration to delaying that until we know if we're returning, because I wondered about the validity of it if students are in their own homes taking it, and if it's worth that time and commitment, or if we're going to get any real data out of that.
We have delayed it for a brief period of time, but we met with the company that provides us with the STAR and helps us administer the STAR. They have retrofitted their not retrofitted, but they made updates to their program for remote learning. So we are, again, we're a little behind where we usually would be, but we still intend to administer the STAR even in the remote area, and we believe that we will get valid results with the changes that they've made. And I can give you a detailed description of that, or I can have Dr. Pelicello send a detailed description of the changes they made and why we feel that's a valid instrument this time.
Thank you.
And I don't know if this is new business either, but I wanted to ask Dr. Palina, how are we doing with providing those hotspots in areas that are challenged?
We purchased 70 hotspots, or 100 hotspots. We've given 70 hotspots out, for those individual hotspots. And Mr. Tomczyk, actually, I talked to him right before we came to the meeting today. And he's continuing to work with Spectrum on some of our dead zones within the district. So we are, our hotspots are out. We still have 30 left, so we still have some to distribute. And like I said in the beginning, we did give out more than 3,000 Chromebooks. So we're going to look, and early next week, I'll have a good look at our attendance, and we'll get a really good idea of who is able and who is signing on. And then we can follow up with that data by talking to, we find out who's not on, and then we can go out and find out why. And if connectivity is an issue, we have some solutions for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Other new businesses, there's a draft of the annotated board calendar for 2020-2021 that was in your in the board library. You've had a chance to look at that. Are there any questions about it? If not, we will have that on the agenda for October 7th. If you have any questions after reviewing it, please send those questions to Mrs. DePerna or myself or Mrs. Scheer, and we will try to answer your question. There's also a final draft of the 2020-2021 Board of Education goals, which the goal drafting committee met on Monday, and I think we had a very productive meeting that allowed us to come to a final draft. And I think I can ask the committee, we had scheduled another meeting of the committee for next Monday, but I don't think that we need that now. Is that correct? So that would be directed to Mr. Spicer and Mrs. Scheer and Dr. Jacobowitz, that question.
I thought we hammered it out completely through the emails. I thought we got that.
Yeah, I did. I sent it out to you all by email this afternoon and asked you to look at it, but it's not going to be on the agenda until October 7th.
Unless one of the other board members comes back with some concerns that we would need to review in another meeting, I think the document is settled. Ms. Shearer and Dr. Jacobowitz, what do you think?
Well, I think it's up to the board to finally decide. We need to have discussion about the goals, but I think that this year's been very strange, and many of the goals are a continuation of what we had last year. But we do have additional goals pertaining to the SROs and continuing the book studies. And in addition to that, we wanted to explore different ways to communicate with parents and students other than coffee and conversation, which has been poorly attended the last few years. So I think everybody needs to read it, and if they agree, and we need to have the discussion on the 7th.
Okay, Mrs. Jordan?
I just want to thank the committee, and I really appreciate the way they're lined up, like just a tower of power right there in the center of my screen.
Okay.
I do appreciate the hammering out of
Your screen, not on this one. I can only see 3 people on mine.
So I just really appreciate the work you did, and I think that you did a very complete job.
Thank you. I would like to thank Mrs. Shear because she did the first draft. Mrs. Shear did the second draft. Mrs. Shear did the final draft. And we had a very good discussion. That was about an hour and 45 minutes on Monday afternoon. I think it was the most productive board goal drafting meeting that I've participated in, and I've been in a lot of them over the last many years. And then the final item is the resolutions for the NISBA convention, virtual convention, which any recommendations or changes have to be sent to NISBA by September 30th, I believe.
I thought it was the 17th, which is Friday.
Oh, was this Friday?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think I sent that out actually.
This is Friday.
The 18th.
Right, September 17th or 18th?
18th, Friday.
September the 18th.
Yep.
Okay, well, that was a screw up here.
I actually just sent a reminder out, I think it was Monday, that, this is due.
Yeah.
So if you have any suggestions, I mean, board members can still look at it, and send me their ideas, I can put it together and send it back out to you.
And also our representative can can take the floor at any time during the meeting and request, sorry, Mr. Lamb, is it Mr. Lamb?
Thank you.
Yeah.
And request changes to resolutions on the spot, if that would, if the board
There was
wanted to do
also
that.
in the email a form for late submissions, so.
Okay. Well, why don't you all look at it? Now, Dr. Padalino is suggesting that we may need a special board meeting next week on the budget. If we do that, we could also discuss the NISBA resolutions and do a late submission if necessary, or tell Mr. Lamb what we would like him to put on the floor at the meeting. If everyone agrees with that. And Mrs. Jordan?
I don't know if I'm crazy, but I kind of feel we should just have one resolution, and it should be to restore funding to schools. I don't know. I don't know how other people feel about it, but I don't think we have the luxury of doing anything but just restoring our funding. I'm just so devastated by what's happening. And it just seems that we dissipate the energy if we go into what we normally have in a typical year where we can highlight certain aspects of it. It just seems like it's just one big hole right now.
Would you like to put that in the form of a resolution for us to consider? So if you've moved that, is there a second?
I don't know. I'd just like to have feedback on that. I don't know.
If there's a motion on the floor to proceed with creating that resolution, I support it, and I agree with Suzanne's whole notion that in this particular time, it's really important not to dilute our energies in this particular thing.
Okay, so are you seconding it then, Mr. Spicer?
If there's a motion on the floor, I second it.
Okay, so that's the motion on the floor. So we know how Mrs. Jordan feels, we know how Mr. Spicer feels about that. Is there any other comment from a board member?
I'm just curious, is this something this is not a change, so we would wait until the convention to bring it up on the floor?
Yeah.
Correct?
I'm not sure.
We could send it in now.
I think we could send it in now.
It's an amendment to their resolutions.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, one way or another, we could get it on the floor one way or another, or at least get it to NISBA. Would you like to draft the resolution, Mrs. Jordan, which we could approve tonight in anticipation of the excellent job you always do in that area?
Is that a motion on the floor?
Yeah, that's the motion.
It's going to be very succinct. Dr. Collins, you want to help me? We can do on the phone.
Okay, so I could amend the resolution, offer an amendment that Mrs. Collins or Mrs. Jordan and Dr. Collins draft that resolution so we can send it into NISBA.
Does that motion need a second?
Yes.
I second it.
Okay, so that's the question. The amendment is on the floor. All in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye.
Aye. How do you vote?
Opposed, say nay. So that amendment, I'm sorry,
It's
So-
unanimous.
the amendment is unanimous, and then we vote on the question. So all in favor of the question, submitting that resolution to NISBA, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Abstentions? So that's unanimously adopted also. I'm not aware of any other new business, if anyone else is.
Mr. Chauncey,
Yes?
before you move on from that, by Robert's Rules of Order, that's got to be presented on the floor then, am I correct? But that cannot be just sent in now, because the deadline was already well past for resolutions.
18th
Right.
for resolution.
No, resolutions were back in June, wasn't it, or July? And we're right now dealing with the ones that are already presented. So this is going to have to be presented on the floor.
You can do, Herb, that's exactly right. You can present motions, even if you did it that day, you can present the motion on the floor. They call any resolutions to be, any other resolutions to be presented on this day. And you state the resolution, and then the whole body votes as to whether they want to hear it. if they don't want to hear it and vote you down right away, then you can't proceed. But yes, you can do that. You can present a motion on, you can present a resolution on the day.
Okay.
There
So
is
that's
a
you, Mr. Lamb, right?
What's that?
It's Mr. Lamb this year. You're the delegate, correct?
Yes.
So you would be doing it.
I don't want to get us shut out though, because even though you're presenting a resolution on the day, you may still have to let NISBA know ahead of time that you're going to be presenting a resolution on the day. Because I remember they were all listed. All the resolutions that were going to be presented that day were not a surprise, they were listed. But they were made on that day. So there has to be a way to let NISBA know ahead of time that you are going to do that. Otherwise, you might be shut out.
Yeah, and I had
Why not
a,
send it to them in a letter, because we didn't know what the reality of the cuts would be to our budget, and I dare say in the nearly 700 school districts in the rest of New York, everybody's feeling the impact. So
I actually had a meeting this week from one of the outreach people from NISBA who checks in about once a year. They'll check in with me and see how we doing, kind of thing. And I have his name, and he had his email, and he said to give him a holler if we had any questions. So Camille and I will reach out to him tomorrow and find out what the procedure would be for us to get a resolution on the floor, if we have to send it ahead of time, or how we would do it. And I'll communicate that back to the board.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
So, are we done with the NISBA?
Yes,
Because I just had a quick question about the annotated calendar. We're going to review this at the next meeting, is that correct?
yes.
Your meetings are not on there. Thank you for sending me the verification that the meetings were on the dates that I thought they were on initially. But I didn't have an opportunity today to put them into the calendar.
Okay, because Mr. Burge and I understand it took us some time to find a time to meet, and we kind of hammered out a schedule for the T&L reporting that was aligned with board meetings, and so some of these don't quite match anymore. Like the first quarterly report, I assume that's talking about first quarter data, is that correct, on January 20th?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just make some notes so that we can discuss and make changes for the next time.
We can make changes ahead of time if you have a different schedule, because the draft was for people to review and verify whether or not those dates were in line with when the reports would be ready.
Why don't I just send you some information, Ms. Shearer? Like I'll just email you, or kind of, because I know I sent you the new dates, but we need to realign kind of the quarterly reporting, which we're not going to be hearing reports on each quarter. We haven't done that in a few years just because it got so cumbersome. So I will email you to kind of clarify what that will look like for the 2020-2021 school year.
Okay.
Okay, and also on the annotated calendar, if anyone would like it in the spreadsheet format that we had last year, let me know, and we'll present 2 versions of it if necessary. But I'd like to thank again Mrs. Shear for her work on this.
Colored.
Yeah.
Very pretty.
I like the colors.
Okay. Board member announcements.
I just have a quick announcement, which is that so I have 4 kids in this school, in the King City School District, and so we've had now our first few days of school, and there have been a bunch of hiccups, some humorous ones and some frustrating ones, but I do feel overall that it's tough and it's hard, and there's nothing that replaces being in a classroom with a teacher. But I do feel that our teachers are giving everything that they have, and I feel like the students in the classes are giving everything that they have. And we're having some real, genuine and sincere moments and days of learning. And I just appreciate all the effort that's going into it. It's not the same, but everybody clearly is putting effort in and is clearly trying. And I'm just seeing that in all places. And I really appreciate that effort from every angle.
Thank you. Dr. Collins?
I would like to echo that from being behind the scenes on elementary side of things with a first grader. I've also just been incredibly impressed with the amount of communication coming from school and the teacher and relative to what my family experienced last spring. So I'm impressed with the changes and everybody just being really proactive to make things better and better from day to day and relative to last spring. So thanks to the teachers and the administrators for doing that.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Just three quick announcements that, the first one, I just want to draw everyone's attention to our website. We have virtual open houses all listed for all of our schools on our website. So if you want to go to a virtual open house, the dates and times are all there. Also, if you are listening to NPR, tomorrow at 9 o'clock on the morning edition, they will be doing a piece on Wild Earth and their work with the Kingston City School District. So you can hear our Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education, Beth Bonville, on there being interviewed, as well as our folks from Wild Earth. So talking about the work that they've done here. So David Brownstein and Beth Bonville will be talking about that with NPR. So tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock on Morning Edition. And lastly, I know there was a question of what MAGBO was, and I had said about state aid, but they actually do our Medicaid reimbursement, so I misspoke on that.
Okay.
So they do our Medicaid reimbursement, ensure that we get reimbursed for our students who receive Medicaid for services that we provide.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Well, it's exciting to hear about NPR. It's also exciting to hear about how well the virtual learning has gone so far since September 8th. Okay, it's time for adjournment if someone would like to make that motion.
I make the motion.
Mr. Michael, a second. Mrs. Lau, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
I miss you all terribly. Not all.
Good night.